Welcome everybody to the third episode of Technically Bitcoin. Super excited to be here. My name is Jan. I am the CSO at Xverse. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about BRCs. But before we get into that, Tyler, welcome.
Thanks, Jan. Welcome to the fourth episode of Technically Bitcoin.
Oh, it's fourth. It's fourth. It's not third. It's fourth.
What's up, everybody? I'm Tyler. I'm a sorcerer at the Taproot Wizards. Was the first employee there. Really excited to be here with Jan today and cranking with you all, talking about what the BRC-20 protocol is.
BRC-20's Domo, the creator of the protocol, launched this, I believe it was in March 2023. So it is a while ago. But since then, it really popped off. And now, obviously, in Asia, that's really the hotspot for BRC-20s. People in Asia love BRC-20s. And you obviously even see with Binance, OKX, and many of these very large centralized exchanges jumping on the train, supporting these things, listing these things. And again, that brings a lot more eyeballs and a lot more liquidity to all of these things. And so that's why I think it's something that you cannot really avoid, and it doesn't really matter. You love it, you hate it. It's really part of the Ordinals protocol. A lot of people are interested in this. And obviously, a lot of you are trading these things. And so what we want to do today is really kind of, again, just explain what this is all about and how it even came to be, right? And so, Tyler, let's get into it. The BRC-20 protocol. Give us some sort of brief summary of this, what it is, what it means, and what it can do.
The way I think BRC-20 should be defined is that it's a protocol built on top of Ordinals, and it allows for the creation of fungible tokens on Bitcoin. It actually uses the Ordinals protocol to get this data that we'll talk about in these functions on the chain. And essentially, that's allowing us, in the same way that ERC-20s allow you to create the meme coins on Ethereum, BRC-20s are allowing you to create the meme coins or the valuable coins on Bitcoin. Choose to do with them as you will. But it is a way to create these fungible tokens on Bitcoin.
Currently, right now, this is really the protocol, the standard that has the most adoption, right? When it comes to creating fungible tokens on Bitcoin. How does it even work? So, Tyler, I want to create, let's say, Jan coin today, I want to create my own coin. Obviously, I'm not doing that. Don't buy into that stuff if it exists. Please, guys, don't do that. But if I want to create a coin today, so what do I need to do? I see these functions, deploy, mint, and transfer. Those are the only options we have available. Is that correct?
Those are indeed the only options we have available. So, let's put down our goal today. Let's make Jan coin. Let's get it minted. Jan, you're going to have to pick one more character to go after JAN. We'll get to that in the deploy section. Deploy is the first function that we're going to talk about in BRC-20, and I'm going to walk you through what each one of these things means that you see over here. But essentially, the deploy function is how you create a new BRC-20 token on the BRC-20 protocol. One thing that's really important to remember is that the ticker name, it cannot have been used by another BRC-20 deployment, and that's case insensitive. So we're going to look at ordi right now just because I think it's the most famous, the most volume traded coin out there. First, you have P, and P just stands for protocol. Protocol says, hey, we are going to be using the BRC-20 protocol. This thing should be a BRC-20. The second thing is the op or operation, what I call a function. And here it's very simple. It's just deploy. We're saying, hey, with this, we want to deploy a new BRC-20. And what new BRC-20 do we want to deploy? Well, we want it to have a ticker. And in this case, we see the ticker is ordi. Now, something important to remember here is that tickers have to be exactly 4 bytes. So here there are 4 characters. You might see some BRC-20s that are emojis. And they're able to be emojis because those emojis are actually 4 bytes of data, and they just happen to be rendered to look like emojis. So if we wanted to make Jan coin, we might have to get a little creative. So we could say, the ticker may be JANC for Jan coin.
Yeah.
But we couldn't just do JAN. If we did, that would be an invalid ticker, and this wouldn't be picked up by the protocol. Let's talk about some of the rules around the deploy function. If we put a space, does it count? And the answer is that we're not treating the space as a character. If you try and say, oh, I have space JAN and you have JAN space, these are different. We say, no, actually both of these are invalid because they don't have actually 4 bytes of data associated with them. The space does not count towards that. And so you have to have that 4 bytes of data, a 4-byte string, in order to get your token, your ticker accepted by the protocol. Another rule, it's that ticker must be unique. If YANC already exists as a ticker, you can't create a new YANC and change the total amount or the limits that are allowed in the mint. And then some of the other rules are actually going to have to do with these bits of the deploy contract we haven't talked about yet. The max is the total limit. So this is the number of BRC-20 tokens for that ticker that can be minted. Okay, so this is basically the number of mints, better word for that is total supply. And then this final one, the limit, is it specifies how much you can mint with one inscription, with one mint function, which we're about to talk to. So here we see that the limit is 1,000. This is how much you can mint at a time. So you can't mint more than that.
If you do, it's not valid mint, right? Because if for whatever reason you make a mistake, spelling mistake in one of these things, it just doesn't work. It's not counted.
Exactly. So the protocol, essentially, it sits on top of Ordinals, and it's going to go look for inscriptions. And this is important, right? Because the actual data in the inscription is literally this text, JSON format, open curly braces, quote, P, quote, colon. All of that text is just going into the inscription data in the same way that last week we talked about the OMB's actual JPEG data going into the inscription data. Well, here, this is much easier. We are literally just putting this text in as the inscription data. So the cost to create and deploy a BRC-20 is actually quite small because the data requirements to do this, there's really not that much. There's maybe, 100 characters in there.
What does it mean that the ticker must be unique? Just imagine a situation that you and me, Tyler, okay, we decide today we want to deploy the same exact ticker, right? Like you're in the US, I'm in Asia, and we're degenning, and we are not talking to each other, and we're going to say, hey, let's deploy this ticker at the same time without really knowing we're doing it. And so what will matter is which one will get confirmed first, right? Like which of those inscriptions will actually be confirmed in the Bitcoin blockchain first, and that will say, hey, this is the first and unique ticker that is associated with it, right? And whatever is minted afterwards or whatever is inscribed afterwards, it just doesn't count. That's just what it is.
This is where inscription numbers come into play. So this is our rule number 3. I'm just going to call it first is first. How do we define first in the BRC-20 protocol? Well, we define it by inscription numbers. So first is defined by the inscription number. The inscription numbers are assigned when a new block is mined. Let's say there's 100 transactions that go into it. You go in through that block and you assign new inscription numbers starting with the highest fee that was paid. The person that paid the highest fee rate is going to get assigned the inscription number first. An interesting anecdote here, in the BRC-20 history, our good friend Reindel, who now works with us at the Taproot Wizards, created this thing called the Sophon. And what the Sophon did is it sat in the mempool and it watched the mempool. And it said, hey, check and see if you see one of these new deploy functions coming out. So we go back to our deploy function over here. And what it did is it says, if you see a new deploy function, I don't like BRC-20s. I don't want to see more of these out there. What am I going to do? I'm going to find their deploy function. I'm going to copy it exactly, except the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this total supply. I'm going to change it from whatever they had to the number 1. So now there can only be one token associated with whatever the ticker is that this person wanted to create, right? So if you tried to create the YANC coin and you said, hey, I want 21 million of these, set the limit to 1,000. Well, Rindell went in with his Sophon and he paid a little more. He watched the mempool and he said, set the total supply to 1 and set the amount you can mint at a time to 1. So now there's only one of these. Good luck selling your Yan-C coins to a bunch of people. There's only one of them now. And so that's what we really mean by first is first. Whichever one shows up confirmed first in the block based on fee rate, that's the one that's going to be given the lower inscription number, right? Which means it is first. When we talk about this protocol existing, what's actually happening? Well, there are people running these BRC-20 indexers out there. And the BRC-20 indexers follow all the rules we just described, right? They check that, okay, there's a new deploy function. Okay, let's see if it's first. Let's make sure the bytes are correct. Let's make sure the ticker hasn't been used before. Okay, we've done all these things. Great, deploy it. But really, the protocol is just defined by these rules that we come to social consensus around. There is no grand law of the universe that says BRC-20s must have 4 bytes.
Okay, so let's move on. So we have covered this deploy function, which is obviously very important. And so now, what do you do next? You want to allow people to mint some of those tokens and to bring all of the available supply to the existence. How does that happen?
This one will kind of take us through a few more rules in the protocol. Let's just quickly review what we learned last time. So again, you're just putting this data on chain in a text inscription that looks exactly like what you see in this mint function. I left our deploy function up here just so everyone remembers that we deployed ordi and there's 21 million of them. We go back to mint and we say, okay, great. We check, we see that the protocol, the P, is again BRC-20. Great, we're working on the right protocol. Now we're saying here's a new operation. We want to do a mint operation or a mint function. We're specifying what ticker we want to do this mint function on. And then, AMT specifies exactly what you think it is, which is the amount you want to mint. Now we have to talk about what are the actual rules that come along with this. What are the rules for minting and what makes a mint valid versus invalid? Rule number 1. This one's going to appear in all of our rules because inscriptions. First is first. The first mints to show up, the ones that get inscribed on lower inscription numbers, they're canonically before ones that show up later. And then the second rule is that you cannot mint more than the limit defined by the max total supply. So remember last time we said ordi says there's a max total supply of 21 million. A mint is not valid if it exceeds that max total supply. That's it. It's pretty simple. What's really cool about this is it creates these fair launches where as soon as the deploy is out there, if you decide, hey, you really want Yan-C coin, pay high fee rates and make sure your inscriptions get into the next block and get confirmed so that you can mint over and over and over again to kind of crank up your balance of the Yan coin. One final point on that, right, is that each time you want to mint, let's do an example. Let's say you want to mint 10,000 ordi. Well, you can't just say mint 10,000 ordi. And actually, that's a third rule here, right? We're basically saying the amount, it has to be less than or equal to the limit, the lim defined in the deploy contract. So if you want 10,000 ordi, you can't just say BRC-20 mint ordi amount 10,000. That's not valid because in the deploy contract, we said you have to inscribe every time you want another 1,000. So if you wanted to go and you wanted to say, hey, I want 10,000, you're going to have to do this mint function 10 times.
It's an interesting point, right? Because you could theoretically say, hey, I want to mint 69 ordi, right? That's fine. You could do fine. Like any number that is below or equal to the limit.
And there's one edge case here, and that is when the max supply is close to being reached. Let's say that 20,900,000 99,900 ordi have been minted out. So there's 100 left. You can still inscribe this mint function that says amount is 1,000. And if you were the last one to get in there,
Yeah, you would get the 100, right?
you would get the 100 that were left, even though you said amount is 1,000. You're the one edge case where, okay, so you wanted that much. You can't get that much, but we'll give you what's left. And then any
that's
mint function that's inscribed after that is invalid, because now we've passed the max. We passed the total supply. Sorry, you paid transaction fees, you tried to mint. Too bad, first is first.
So we covered these basic rules of BRC-20s, and we covered the deploy function, we covered the mint function, and right now, the last part is the transfer function, which is something that obviously is important if you mint and you want to maybe transfer it into a centralized exchange, you know, and you can trade it there, or you want to just transfer some young coin to Tyler because he's a good chat and he's helping with all this stuff. I'm going to give him some of my coins, you know, who knows? So Tyler, how does this work?
To start talking about transfers, we actually need to start talking about balances. You have two different balances in any wallet that you may hold BRC-20 in. You have what's called an available balance, and then you have what's called a transferable balance. So let's say you started with a fresh wallet, Jan, and you got excited about ordi, and you went and you minted 3,000 ordi. Now, just so we remember, that actually means that you had to mint 1K here, you had to mint 1K here, and then you had to do a third mint of 1K, right? Because that was the limit.
You would have to make 3 transactions, separate transactions.
Let's say that you want to hook me up and you're going to transfer me 100 ordi. So if you wanted to do that, the first thing you would do, what we call inscribing the transfer function. What that means, if we just go back and run through what this, JSON, what the actual text is telling us, we have our protocol, the BRC-20. We have the operation we want to do. We have the ticker, so which BRC-20 do we want to operate on? And then we have an amount. So how much do you want to transfer? So if you went to your favorite inscribing service and you had an available balance of 300, you could inscribe this transfer function, and what that's going to do is it's going to update your transferable balance. So if we scroll down, essentially, you're going to now be in a situation where you have 2,900 ordi in your available balance and 100 in your transferable balance. And so now, okay, you haven't sent this to me. You haven't done anything. All you did with this inscribe transfer is you've indicated you have the intent to send 100 ordi to someone. Nothing has gone anywhere, but you have paid a fee to inscribe this thing in Bitcoin, right? That cost you something. Going back to our inscription episode, you had to pay to put this data on the blockchain, this transfer function.
Just wanted to kind of do a shameless plug here. What we do with XVerse, it's actually kind of abstracting this thing away from the user. So you are basically transferring BRC-20s the same way you would transfer any other token or even Bitcoin itself. So you basically just say, hey, I want to transfer this to Tyler. So I basically just fill in the address that I'm transferring to. And all of these things, the inscription transfers and everything kind of happens in the background. And you don't have to care as a user to okay, now I need to take this once I receive it in the wallet, and then I need to send it to that address. And so all of these things are kind of abstracted. But again, this stuff still has to happen in the background. It's not that it doesn't happen. That inscription still has to be inscribed and then transferred to that specific address. So just wanted to say that there are some ways to make it slightly easier for the user. However, that process that you just described, Tyler, it still has to happen.
So basically, Jan, you now own a UTXO, right? You own a UTXO, and the first SAT of it is going to say, it's going to point to this transfer function data, right? So, Jan, you now own this in your wallet. Now, if you want to actually transfer this to me, you're going to have to actually do another transaction where you send that UTXO that you just created to me. This is just our standard transaction chart that we've been using before. So Jan, you own this UTXO. Let's say it's got 546 sats right around the dust limit.
Yeah.
And if you want to send it to me, well, now this is going to be a UTXO that Tyler owns. And let's say it's still 546 sats because you paid fees out of some fee UTXO down here. And now I've received this inscription from you. So what we can do is we can actually annotate this available balance and transferable balance to have both of us on there. So after you've completed this transaction, when you started, you had this 100 transferable balance, and now you sent it to me. So now this goes away, and you now have 0. And if we add me to here, now I have 100 ordi available, but I have 0 of this transferable. So I don't have any ordi that's transferable. If I wanted to transfer this back to you, I have to repeat the process that we just talked about. So I would have to go back, I'd have to inscribe a transfer to myself again, and then I'd have to send that transfer to you. And so this is how we can start to see that BRC-20 requires a lot of UTXO usage and creation, because every time we want to transfer a balance, we have to create a new UTXO that holds this transfer function on it. And so that causes the UTXO set, the total number of UTXOs on the network, to expand very rapidly, particularly when these things are so in demand. And so that's why we're seeing these high fee rates on the network right now that are 300 plus sats per VByte. You know, people are paying $20 just to get their transfer or their mint or their whatever in, because there's such demand to get this new UTXO created on the network.
Maybe just to summarize what you were just describing is that, okay, I want to send the ordi to you. So I inscribe a transfer, then take that transfer inscription, send it to your wallet. But then basically you cannot do anything with that transfer inscription. That inscription is basically useless now. I think by now, guys, you should have some sort of basic understanding of what BRC-20s are, the limits, the rules of the protocol. And obviously it's a little bit more complicated than that. There are other functions, there are other potential options that we could explore. But most of the people that are using BRC-20s today, they're just focusing on these basic things.
I think today, hopefully, we've learned what BRC-20s are. They are this protocol for creating fungible tokens on top of Bitcoin, and they use ordinals to do that. It's pretty simple. Hopefully today you feel smarter for having watched this, because there's really only 3 things you can do with BRC-20s. You can deploy them, you can mint them, and you can transfer them. And we saw that the instruction set, the specification of those, is very human legible. You can read these and you can understand what's happening. The thing to remember if you're actually playing with BRC-20s is that you're going to have a wallet. And in your wallet, there's these 2 fields. There's the available balance, and then there's the transferable balance. And you have to remember that if you want to send BRC-20s, you have to go through that 2-step transaction process. You have to first inscribe how much you want to transfer, and then you actually have to send that UTXO, the thing that you inscribed the transfer function to the person. And when it gets to them, that now lives in their available balance. They can't transfer it out immediately if they want to do something. They again have to go through that 2-step process.
I think it's great. Thanks so much, Tyler, today for joining me again to go over this and to hopefully educate some degens that are minting, deploying, and transferring these BRC-20s all day long. Now they at least kind of understand, what's behind it technically. Stay tuned. We're going to do another episode very soon. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please do let us know. We would be happy to cover anything that you're interested in.
Excited for the next one, and thanks for helping put this together, Jan.